This is David Dubal, and I am sitting across from one of the great pianists of our time. He is also something more than a pianist. He is an educator, a lover, and a Lisztian. And to be a Lisztian in our pale society is not always easy. May I introduce to you, our audience, Jerome Rose, who on the 22nd, that hallowed day in October, Liszt's birthday. And on that day, Jerome Rose will play an enormous, a challenging, a demanding, and a magnificent program at New York's Alice Tully Hall at Lincoln Center. It will be, I presume, at 8 o'clock. If my guest says no, he will enter into this introduction and correct me. How are you, Jerome Rose?
I'm very fine. I don't know what to say after such an introduction.
It was good.
It was extremely good. I feel the pressure of success burdening me about this concert that I'm playing on the 22nd. Anyway, for that, I certainly thank you.
Well, don't cancel it.
I have
you know how hard success is to take. Especially,
and it is true. The success is harder to take than the small failures.
Absolutely. What did Oscar Wilde said? That there's one thing more difficult than getting what you than not getting what you want, and that is getting what you want.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, success is not easy always to accept, and many people have had a hard time with it. And that brings me to an interesting question. Was there anyone in the world, in certain worldly ways, more successful than our hero Franz Liszt? How did he handle success, in your opinion, Jerome?
Liszt had a very great time handling success.
Oh, really?
Because, as we all know, Liszt had a very great public success. But like all great men, the public appraisal was not nearly as important to him as his own appraisal of himself. And as a man of genius, he was sensitive and aware of what true genius was, and had a lifetime struggle meeting his own self-worth in terms of accomplishing what he thought he was capable of. Mm-hmm. And only he could be his real critic. And that was a heavy burden for him, because he, as a great artist and as a great man, recognized what real genius meant. And it was a very heavy burden, because he drew upon his gifts and he, in a way, strained his talents to the limit to reach the heights of artistic achievement. Like many creative people, he saw beyond his own existence on earth to the afterlife of creative energy and creative development, and wrote for the ages. He knew he came from the great repertoire and the great artists before him. He lived with the great artists of his time. He was constantly involved with what great art meant, and being a religious figure in his own capacity as well as an artist, he was very concerned with the life after him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very heroic existence. We talked yesterday at Juilliard about the life of the hero and what that meant, but it really is a life which excels beyond the single dimension of human existence and goes into the other, how should I say, super life, or the superman.
Mm-hmm.
The 19th century was filled with these kinds of human beings. Some succeeded and some failed, but they didn't question what their true sense of destiny was all about.
Yes,
they just did it.
Goethe said to live is to strive, and they magnificently did that. Liszt was a true Faustian man, wasn't he? He
Absolutely.
A searcher after, in the realm of music, well, he really reinvented so many things and invented new aspects of form. And as for the piano itself and the career of a pianist, without him, well, someone, I think it was Alan Walker, you said that they would have to invent Liszt.
They would have to invent him.
Mm-hmm.
He was really the superhero of his time. Curiously, he was very involved with the Italian poet Tasso, who early in his life had a meteoric success, and then spent the 50 years that came after meeting that kind of appreciation and that kind of success, trying to live with it and trying to keep that kind of affirmation alive in his own musical world and actually in the society in which he lived. Very few artists are burdened with that, and that superstar status, which they have to maintain throughout their life.
Mm-hmm.
It's as you say, success being the blessing and the curse, because the expectation is constantly there. And, of course, in his personal life, those kinds of demands of his mistresses and his children, and the need to fulfill that aspect of his life and doing that well also was a tremendous burden in his life.
Yes, in the history of biography, I don't know of a single person that lived on as many levels, multiple levels, as Liszt did, and as successfully.
Well, the thing that we have now, 100 years after his death, is we can say, yes, as successfully. The unfortunate thing is that during the process of living at the time, he had a hard time bearing that and considering what he was doing successful. The thing, of course, is that within the struggle, you cannot see a retrospective of what that all means. You just go forward.
Mm-hmm.
And he was constantly going forward. He never literally rested, and had enormous bouts in midlife and towards the end of his life of depression.
Mm-hmm.
And through the death of his children and many ruptures in his personal life, he found it very difficult to put the pieces together.
Certainly, and he outlived his great contemporary, Chopin, a friend of his, Schumann, a great, the man who dedicated the fantasy, and Wagner, his own son-in-law, he outlived. So it was difficult.
He lost his prize student, Tausig, very early on.
Very early.
And death stalked his life.
Yes.
It's very touching to read the account in Berlin upon the death of his son, and the son literally died in Cosima's arms.
There's so much unknown about him because the territory is so vast. We have now a great attempt in Alan Walker's first volume of Liszt, and there will be 3 volumes. I know you know Alan Walker very well. Jerome Rose is my guest to honor the birthday of Liszt, and this is the Liszt year, the 100th anniversary of his death, and he was born in 1811, so that's what, 175 years?
Exactly.
On the 22nd of October, and that was the day, the great star when he was born.
Comet, I think.
Halley's Comet was pursuing its course, and that was a sign to his father and to the villagers that there was going to be a great man born, and he was indeed one of the great creative giants of the 19th century. But the problem is that Liszt is still so unexplored. Jerome, what is your program Tuesday night?
Tuesday night, the hook will certainly be the B minor sonata, but I will begin the program from the years of pilgrimage, the Vallée d'Obermann. I will perform the great benediction from the Harmonie Poétique. That's one of the great cycles of Liszt. There will be the Harmonie du Soir from the Transcendental Etudes, and I will cap the program with the Mephisto Waltz. It is
very grueling and tiring program. You're giving all that night.
Well, one does not come to New York to take tidbits about the whole thing. Obviously, you're here and you're celebrating the genius of the man. Of course you do. You do the best you can.
Well, you are not only celebrating Liszt's birthday, you have been doing more. You have actually created one of the most wonderful events in the Liszt year, the Liszt Festival. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was very fortunate to put together in Washington, D.C., many of the cultural meccas of the city, the Kennedy Center, the Library of Congress, the Smithsonian Institution, and we actually performed in the 2 great cathedrals, both the Washington Cathedral and the St. Matthew's, and we did a whole 8-day celebration of
You had
Liszt.
everyone interested in Liszt in the world except me there.
Well, I would say in spirit you were certainly there, and we will certainly have you there. It was sponsored by the CSX Corporation, Richmond, Virginia, and it was a glorious event. I'm happy to report in the field of radio that the gala concert at the Kennedy Center is being broadcast on the 22nd of October all over Canada on the CBC. So I shall be involved in a radio broadcast at the time I'm performing.
Now, didn't Liszt himself, and I think he'd be happy with all that's going on, didn't he say that he was well knowing that his music, especially the later music, was so advanced that he was throwing his lance out into the 20th century, or was that the Princess Wittgenstein herself?
Liszt is quoted as having done that. He was always throwing his lance out one way or the other, so certainly he was aware of what he was doing. The beauty of Liszt, and one of the great things about Liszt, is his enormous curiosity. And Borodin writes a wonderful appraisal of how he visited Liszt in Weimar and how Liszt knew what the entire Russian Five were doing. He was aware of all the latest compositions. He knew what was being composed throughout the entire continent. Composers were sending their scores to him. This was an incredible man of... He reminds me somehow of Leopold Stokowski, who had his fingers on everything. Not because it was good for him, but because the vistas of the imagination and of the mind were constantly absorbing the excitement of the musical language as it progressed.
And actually in so many other languages too, for he was interested in everything. He was really quite an intellectual mind.
It's an incredible little vignette out of the biography of Liszt, how his son Daniel, who was studying in Vienna, Liszt insisted that he take lessons in Hungarian while he was living in Vienna because he wanted him to learn his ethnic language that Liszt himself had not learned when he was a young man growing up. And the son dutifully learned Hungarian at that particular time. So wonderful touch. One of the nice things about the biography of the Walker biography is you will get a sense of the man from these little details.
Yes, many of them, and many things that prove how iconoclastic Liszt was in the way he thought of performing. And of course, the dedication of literally opening up every city that had never really had a piano recital. It was so important for him to play in Constantinople. It was important for him to play in Portugal. And wherever there was a piano, he somehow got there. During these years of splendor.
He was literally the first pianist to do this.
The creator of the modern career.
He was without a doubt the creator of the modern career. And to any of us who performed this repertoire, to realize that he premiered the Beethoven symphonies, he transcribed the Symphonie Fantastique of Berlioz. This was the workaholic from the first start.
Yes.
And one of the truly great romantic figures.
Yes, but not the workaholic in just compulsive sense, but someone who had to get it all out no matter what, for it was flowing in him in a desperate energy.
Yes, I mean this is very, very clear when you see the manuscript writing that the mind was working at breakneck speed. It's just an incredible personality. He had so much energy, he literally had to exhaust himself.
Yes, and in the sense of his lifespan, Chopin, well, we understand him dying at 38, or Schumann at 46, or even Mendelssohn at 38, but Liszt had to live that 75 years. He just had to. It was necessary.
Well, I think he had a sense of his destiny in all of this that he realized. It's very difficult to make a critique of that because at age 55 or so, he did become very involved with the Catholic Church, taking minor vows, becoming the cleric. And he felt his life in a sort of gradus ad parnassum, in going through various stages, opening up doors and finding different avenues in which his life is, certainly his spiritual life and its overall development. But the beauty of Liszt and what is not really understood about the man is the spiritual life which was being nurtured through his entire life.
Yes.
And the religious works are just overwhelming because he really poured himself out in great eloquence in this particular world.
And on that recital that you'll be playing Tuesday at Tully Hall at 8 o'clock, you will be playing one of the magnificent Liszt works, still so unknown, the Benediction to God in the Solitude, a 18-minute piece of genius. But we're going to start, Jerome Rose, the music part of our program, and many are now waiting for Liszt, and of course, knowing how perverse I am, we shall hear some Schubert. No. We're going to hear from your very recent set, which has gotten absolute stunning reviews everywhere, and well, they should have. This is a Vox set of the Transcendental Etudes as well as 4 Liszt waltzes, and we're going to start with, what is it? Tell me just a little bit about this swirling snow.
Chasse-Neige, the footsteps in the snow. And one of the great impressionistic pieces, the precursor of the entire French line of impressionist composers. An amazing piece.
And it's magnificently difficult, isn't it?
It's magnificently difficult, but all of Liszt is magnificently difficult. But what you have here is, of course, a great pianist writing repertoire for the piano, with an understanding of the instrument that only the great pianists had.
Yes. Chasse-Neige is a work also not well known enough, and it's heartbreaking to me. Its whole current. Busoni loved it. All of the great pianists who ever really played it have understood its greatness. I think this is one of the great of the Transcendental Etudes.
What you have is a tragic introspection.
Yes.
And this is one of the great aspects of Liszt, is that sense of tragedy.
The 12th Etude of the Transcendental set. Let us now hear the artist Jerome Rose. The great tragic tone poem, the last Transcendental Etude of Liszt, played by Jerome Rose, who knows how to play Franz Liszt, which is not so simple to do, even if you can play the notes. It's something more than notes, and we will hear more from him right after this message. This is David Dubal returning to you, and my guest is the celebrated pianist Jerome Rose, who is playing this Tuesday, October 22nd, Liszt's birthday, a commemorative program dedicated to the Hungarian master. He'll be playing the towering work of romantic piano music, the Liszt Sonata in B minor, as well as the Mephisto Waltz, and contrasting that area, that diabolical, sardonic Liszt, with the religiosity of Liszt at the benediction to God in the solitude. Jerome Rose, there's so much that we must talk about, and we cannot. We've just met really yesterday. We have our spiritual kinship with Liszt and many other things, and I do want to tell you that it's going to be impossible even to touch your own huge discography, which is more than Liszt. You have recorded Schubert and so forth. I certainly don't want to just typecast you, but you are a pianist with a complete repertoire. Indeed, how did you come to Liszt? Was it early or later?
Basically, it was much later, and it was completely by accident. I had recorded Schumann, and these records were already made, and I went to Vox Records, and they were interested in releasing the Schumann, and they said, I have other projects for you, and we offer you the complete Clementi sonatas or the Years of Pilgrimage of Liszt. And that's where it began. Every one of the pieces I learned in my mature years, following a rigid classical education on the piano. So I brought to it a how should I say, a certain romantic experience, which was non-Lisztian. And I think it was, in a way, quite successful, because I did not have any of the, how should I say, the prejudices about what the music represented. And one of the things, when you read the manuscripts and you see the whole classical education of the master, you realize this is not just someone who just passed through music history. This was a thoroughly studied, learned musician. And if you start approaching Liszt with your Baroque sense of counterpoint and your sense of classical Beethoven style, he was the great Beethoven player of his time.
The first to really play the 32 sonatas. The one that revealed the Hammerklavier finally to Berlioz, who called it an enigma.
Absolutely. So what you see in the guise of Liszt is a man who in the manuscript took great pains to put down exactly how he wanted this music played. It is not the free-wielding, anything goes type of music making. This is absolutely a clear and clairvoyant musician, and it has to be approached that way. I'm absolutely convinced of that.
And I will say, as a musician, the most comprehensive of the 19th century. Perhaps Brahms, in some ways, was even better educated, but in a different way, without that innovative strain to his
absolutely,
to his creativity.
Absolutely. And the nice thing about Liszt is with the how should I say, the breach between the classical Brahmsian Schumann school and the Wagnerian Lisztian school, he was able to overlook and appreciated Brahms. The manuscript of the B-flat concerto was sent to Liszt. He actually honored and revered Brahms.
Yes.
And there is just no way that Brahms in his piano writing and in his whole development was not influenced by Franz Liszt. It was not possible not to be influenced by Franz Liszt. I can't even believe what it must have been like to have been a pianist and for the first time to have heard Liszt play. And we do have accounts, actually, the Schumann account of having heard Liszt for the first time, and the overwhelming experience of seeing this really smaller, much smaller instrument, which had a wooden frame, some metal reinforcement, suddenly becoming the great colossal instrument that we know it today,
Yes.
and just literally being constructed in Liszt's hands.
He made it happen.
He made it happen, and
halls were built in many cities just
right.
so they could hear him.
But the thing that's exciting, of course, to me as a performer now, as a scholar and one who appreciates the man, is the whole concept of a concert being an event and being an important event, and the sense of music drama. That's something that we tend to forget in the easy way of listening to the radio or casually going to a concert. The performance by a character such as Liszt was literally a one-man dramatic presentation, the language being music. Mm-hmm. And I made the point yesterday that there was a feeling that it was not just an evening's entertainment, but somehow this romantic fusion of energy, that life itself would be somewhat different from the experience of participating in this kind of a concert. And of course, this was his great success, is that he brought this incredible energy to these performances, and people just felt, my God, I'm experiencing something. I'm sure that the Greeks felt the same way about their sense of tragedy. There was a sense of catharsis in a Lisztian concert. And of course, being the child of Byron, he believed in this. He thoroughly believed that it wasn't just light entertainment. Absolutely. And this is the exciting part of dealing, and of course, the music is fused with this, as we talked about in the Chasse-Neige, this profound sense of tragedy and yearning. And there's a cleansing process in actually, when you're performing this music, of actually letting it all come out and living these experiences within the music. He was the great dramatist. The point that was made during the festival in Washington is the songs are absolutely exquisite. A wealth of repertoire that is not that widely known. His great experience with, of course, the song transcriptions of Schubert, of Beethoven, of Schumann, of Chopin, of Mendelssohn. This was a man who understood the meaning of words, and the music itself is infused with you could put words. What does this music mean? And of course, there are great literary references and a great sense of Liszt's own music. He was very evocative as to what words meant to him. Mm-hmm. So it is an exciting experience, because one can say, this makes me feel this. Yes. And there isn't a lot of music that you can just, the words suddenly evoke from yourself. Yes. That you can say, I feel this. Mm-hmm. There's nothing, of course, music has its own language, and in many ways it is enigmatic. But the sense of those emotional responses is within the music itself.
Jerome Rose is also an inspired man when he talks about Liszt, and yesterday at the Juilliard School in my piano literature class, you were so kind, great teacher that you are, great propagandist for this almost mystical output of Liszt's. It is mystical in many ways. You came there and you really inspired these students, because they were spellbound watching you, and then you played for them Benediction and other works. So I want to thank you for that, and I'm sure
it was a joy for me.
They appreciated it very much. On the 22nd, in a few days, this is Sunday night, so Tuesday night, please.
Wednesday night.
It's Wednesday. If I said Tuesday,
Wednesday night. Very important.
I want to say again and again, it's Wednesday night, the 22nd. Liszt was born, and Jerome Rose at Tully Hall will be performing this vast program. Anyone interested in great piano playing, please jog over even to Alice Tully Hall. We are now going to hear Jerome Rose in one of the celebrated works in the double note literature. Would you say so?
Yes, it's one of those nightmarish pieces, but it's great fun to play it.
It's great fun, and it's by a composer that transformed the piano, took the instrument of 3 dimensions, which Chopin had left it at, and added a 4th dimension. Let's now hear Jerome Rose in Fuffalet, the 5th Transcendental Etude of Liszt. Ah, Fufele of Franz Liszt, Will-o'-the-Wisp. Is that how we would translate that?
Close enough.
Okay, we have heard my guest Jerome Rose, and that is a vicious little piece of music, isn't it?
I'm glad I don't have to do that every day. As I was mentioning while we were listening to it, it's the kind of technique that it's a sort of a pianistic nightmare. You could master it one day, and if you haven't really worked on it for a day or two, it's just gone. It's a type of that sort of finesse coordination, you know, this absolute fluttering of the finger that has to be perfectly coordinated with the ear and with the hands. And it's not something that stays with you. This is not the kind of pianistic technique that just lasts. Once it's out of the fingers for just a day
You
or
have
two,
to relearn
it's
it.
gone. It's just gone. And as I say, this is the pianist nightmare, and this is where you always envy the writer or the painter who's actually performed a virtuoso work, and at least he can say, there it is.
Yes, the
Now,
painting
pianists,
is right on the wall.
I mean, I as a performer, I can't say because I have it on record, it's there. It isn't. It isn't there.
I understand
So we
that only too well.
we always, you know, it's there. It's gone to the four winds by now,
And yet it's always lurking in the nervous system.
it's always lurking in the nervous system. But of course, I mean, something like this particular kind of technique,
Yeah.
is, you know, to tap this, and you have to have a type of control. There's no way that you can play a piece like this if you're nervous.
Jerome, let's move on to the big Dante Sonata. Tell me one sentence about it before we embark on this tonal adventure.
It's from the Victor Hugo reading of Dante. Without a doubt, it is infernal music, and you will certainly feel the purgatorio and the infernal of Dante within this music.
We are now going to hear the Dante Sonata in the hands of my guest, Jerome Rose. a ruthless, mighty, reckless, and entirely Lisztian performance of the fabulous work called the Dante Sonata by Franz Liszt in the hands of Jerome Rose, who happens to be with me, and right after this message we will talk about many things. This is David Dubal, and we are playing totally Liszt on this program. Jerome Rose will be playing Wednesday on October 22nd, 1986 at 8 o'clock at Alice Tully Hall at Lincoln Center, a gala Liszt birthday recital including the B minor Sonata, the Mephisto Waltz, the Benediction to God and the Solitude, Valet Dobermann. And I want to say that Jerome Rose is the winner of the Grand Prix du Disque, Franz Liszt, from the Franz Liszt Society in Budapest, and he's the artistic director of the acclaimed Franz Liszt Centennial Celebrations. He is a wonderful teacher, and he teaches in Bowling Green. He has played this year with Schulte, the Chicago, and Commissione, the Houston, and Zinman, the Baltimore, and he is everywhere, and I am so glad to myself have the privilege of meeting him, because Liszt people have to know each other. Let me see, what more can I say about you? There's tons. I know that you have written a most interesting, well, it's not a book exactly, but you're the author of For the Young Virtuoso that's published by Bellwin Mills. Tell me about this, because it's interesting.
Well, this is an interesting book. I thought there was a need for a professional pianist to address all those students of intermediate, early advanced level to actually hear the compositions that they are studying played by professional pianists. Too rarely are piano teachers actually performing for their students. So I wrote a book with 16 pieces. I recorded all of them, and I wrote an introduction about advice on practice, the content of the pieces, the theoretical background of the music, and it's basically a masterclass which I'm giving on what to look for in the music and how to study it. They're intermediate level, but none of these
here they're wonderful. You have works by Scarlatti, Haydn, Mozart,
exactly.
John Field, Franz Liszt. It's a beautiful anthology for the young virtuoso.
It's an anthology, and I think it's an important book because of that kind of content, and the performances are really as masterful as I, as a professional pianist, can make them.
Wonderful.
So I feel very strongly. It's not that one copy the performances, but that the oral memory, it's a hereditary art form. In spite of what we do in our study, we have to have heard good music making.
Absolutely. Well, anyway, I want to say this. I will plug it because this anthology and cassette recording is only $9.95, and if you mail that into Bellwin Mills Publishing Corporation, P.O. Box 4340, Hialeah, Florida 33014.
Thank you very much.
You didn't expect that.
I certainly didn't.
Well, it's right here, so I thought, why not do it?
I'm absolutely delighted. It's a new publication, and I think we're starting an anthology both of Liszt and various other composers, and hopefully there'll be additional volumes out there.
Wonderful. Let's get back. We have just maybe not even enough time for it, but we'll have to do it. A work that I love, Wild Hunt. And the artist is my guest, Jerome Rose. It is the 8th Transcendental Etude of Liszt. performance by Jerome Rose of the Transcendental Etude called The Wild Hunt. Now do you hear what I mean? Please make certain of going on Wednesday to Tully Hall, where you will hear this pianist who truly has that 19th century state of mind. Only through that state of mind can you capture the essence of Liszt. Jerome Rose, thank you for coming to WNCN.
Thank you very much, David. It's a pleasure being here.
This is David Dubal. Thank you for listening.